to Maxed Out Man, helping you become the man you were made to be.
Hey, welcome to episode number 1 of the Maxed Out Man podcast. I was stoked to have my friend Michael Abens join me for this first episode. We've been friends for a few years, and the opportunity to get to know him even better was great. Michael's one of those guys that you look at his life and you say, man, this guy defines success, which one of our big things here at Maxed Out Man is defining success in new and exciting ways, and more of a holistic approach to what success looks like in terms of business and finances and marriage and family, life and all of that. And I think Michael's one that really exemplifies what I would consider to be a very successful life. Obviously he has challenges like anybody else, but it was a great discussion. I think it went in ways that I hadn't expected, but in a great way to get to know somebody, learn from his experience, and just learn about a really cool guy that has done some really cool stuff. I wanted to make sure and give his full bio to make sure I captured everything that he provided to me. I asked for little bios of each one of these. Michael is the owner and CEO of Abens Solutions, LLC, the development firm that created Urable. Urable is an industry-leading business management platform designed specifically for automotive businesses specializing in ceramic coatings, paint protection film, vinyl wrapping, window tinting, and detailing. In his more than 30 years of executive experience in business, principally in large healthcare companies, Abens has been a pioneer in designing unique operating models and software systems that have transformed businesses and industries. We talk all about some of the really awesome stuff that he's done, including he is credited with changing the field of anticoagulation and creating the largest provider of intrathecal, I think that's the wrong pronunciation, but drug therapy in America. He has been featured in Yahoo Business, Forbes, and Entrepreneur Magazine, and he's just an awesome guy. So hope you enjoy this episode. This is episode 1 of the Maxed Out Man podcast featuring Michael Abens.
Let me check my hair. How am I doing?
You're a beautiful man.
You know,
you got those little frameless ones, those glasses.
Yeah, these are these little thin optics. They go on the back end of your phone.
I did that. I had one of those. I love them, but then I really liked my new. This is my phone case now, so I liked my phone case. So I've got these little like telescoping ones that come in this little case. So
same kind of idea.
It sucks. I'm not a fan of losing my eyesight for sure.
No, me neither. But you know, we all cross over at some point.
I know.
It seems like.
And those of us that have spent, I mean, I'm back. So were you probably. Remember the old like heavy Toshiba laptops? I don't know what laptops you were using
the big
back
bricks.
in the day. The ones that weighed like 17 pounds that you had to carry around in your bag. So. Hey man, I'm super excited that you agreed.
I can probably just lose the glasses.
It's whatever you want.
I can see you good enough.
Yeah, that's me too. My vanity takes over on whether or not I can see. I just enlarge all my text on the screen. So, but thanks for coming on. I
freaking love it. I shared this with Vicky, and she's like, "Oh my god, this sounds like a great podcast."
Well, I mean, you know, this is our first one, so this will be fun. But you know, I was thinking about, and I'm recording already, so we'll just kind of, you know,
yeah, that's fine.
Get going. My goal with this is just to have a conversation, like if we were going to lunch, but we had kind of a certain set of topics that we wanted to cover. So I don't want to make it. Some of the podcasts out there are pretty formulaic, and especially when I'm talking to just friends of mine that I admire and all that. I'm really excited just to have a great conversation. When I was thinking about different guys in my life that represent what success is, you were one of the first ones that came up because
thank you.
I've got these little sayings for t-shirts and all that stuff. And one of them is success redefined. Because I think that, especially in today's world, we define success by a certain metric. And I think that the problem is that makes it kind of one-sided, and some people have a difficult time doing success. But let's talk more about that. I want to hear about your story. And then I'll ask you that question on what success, or feel free to talk about what your success means. I mean, I'm interested in what your how you would define success, because I think you and I share similar ideology in that regard, just based on, you're a little bit older than me, not by much, but I think that our lives have taken a kind of a similar path in terms of that.
Yeah, and honestly, I'm sure the definition for me has changed over the years too. It all kind of depends on what stage of your life you're in.
Yeah.
And what you've gone through. So I'm sure it's changed for me. But yeah, it's nice to be where I'm at now and reflect back. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah. Well, I hope we've all matured as we've gotten older a little bit in the way that we define that. So
yeah, and a little wiser, hopefully.
Yeah. So, well, like if somebody said, "Hey, how do you define success in life right now?" How would you answer that? And then also, like, how has that answer changed in the last few decades? Because you've had some experience.
Oh, for now, I'd probably refer to it as the ability to be content.
Oh, absolutely.
There's a lot to be said for contentment and not, being in that race to, keep up with the Joneses, make a certain amount of money, have certain things. There's a lot to be said with being past all of that and just being comfortable who you are and being content with what you have.
Yeah.
Like I don't live in a mansion. When I was making the big money, I probably could have bought a really, big kind of trophy house. But that's just not who I am. And it's certainly not who Vicky is, my wife. So Vicky keeps me grounded, if I'm ever getting a little ahead of myself,
Yeah, they do that.
She keeps me really grounded, and she talks a lot about contentment. And I think that's a powerful word that too many people don't pay attention to because they're too busy chasing the next thing.
Yeah.
I'm done chasing, now for me, it's more about giving. So I'm much more about, supporting others and bringing others along than it is about myself kind of winning a race anymore.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably changed. Early in my career, and honestly, Vicky and I were just talking about this because I just had my birthday, so that's always a reflective time, right? And so I'm 61, for the record, not 70 like Barry Thiel put out there, 61. But we were taking one of our normal walks. We try and walk and hike about 3 to 5 miles a day, and I was just reflecting on how things have changed, throughout our lives. And I was primarily thinking about just all that anxiety that I had, when I was younger in my career and, as a husband and a father, just that anxiety about being a good provider.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's a generational thing, but I mean, I looked at my dad, when I was a kid, looking up to him, and I'm like, Christ, this guy knows how to do everything. I'm never going to be able to, how the hell, where's the manual on being a great dad?
Yeah.
Like, where is that? So I know I really carried that heavy, early on in our relationship that, God, how am I going to ever measure up to this? This guy knew how to do everything.
Yeah.
But then, now that I'm, I've come through all that and I'm on the other side of it, it made me really think about how hard that must have been for him in particular versus it for me. And, because he didn't have the supportive environment that he afforded me.
Yeah.
He was always kind of a second fiddle to his older brother, and there was just a lot of grief there, I think, in his early years growing up. And then he thrust himself into it, and had 5 kids,
wow.
2 jobs, trying to make ends meet, literally built the house we all grew up in, this tiny little house, in the middle of nowhere, because that was what, they could afford at the time. But I don't remember wanting for anything, which was the real trick, right? I mean, I'd leave in the morning and I'd go out and I'd be hanging out and playing sports and games with all the kids in the neighborhood. And I'd show up when the dogs came running to get me, that it was dinner time,
Yeah. I mean, I love that old. I mean, I had the similar experience, but I grew up kind of in rural Texas and Oklahoma when I was really small. That leave the house and don't come back till dark thing, I think, is something that we've lost a little bit. For sure.
Yeah, we didn't have adults around to organize our sporting events. We made the damn rules ourselves, right?
Right. Yeah.
So you just learned a lot of interpersonal skills early on, and you learned how to compromise and, find consensus and just get along and then get on with it.
Yeah. And that's that communication thing that that I think young people are having a tough time with and I try not to say, oh, well, this generation is worse because of this or better because of this. I think it's just, they have different challenges than what we have. And one of the challenges is that they don't really have that opportunity to interact in that way. And I think that's how we get kind of to our society where we're at right now.
It's unfortunate. They have it. They just don't exercise it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
There's, social media. And I mean, this is one of the downsides of the whole social media boom and, just Facebook and the internet and everything. Because we grew up through the evolution of that, right?
Yeah.
I think it's kind of crazy to think about. But these kids who are digital natives now, their kind of day to day is very different than what we grew up with.
Yeah, for sure.
And I can't say it's better or worse. I mean, I think there's trade-offs. But I mean, I think, kids carry a little bit more of a heavy burden to kind of find out who they are, because there's so much falsehood that's projected online.
Yeah.
Right. So they always kind of feel like, oh my gosh, so-and-so is doing amazing and this and that. But, you don't really know, so much of what's presented and projected online is a facade.
Well, they say don't compare your real with someone else's, or your real life with someone else's highlight reel,
right?
Which is what you get with and they literally call it filters, right? Like the Instagram filters and TikTok filters, and
so it's tough on kids. I mean, Vicky teaches in an all-girls Catholic school, 6 through 12, so she really sees what these kids kind of deal with social media and all that anxiety.
Yeah.
My two kids, Chris and Kyle, they missed the bulk of that. So they're a little bit older, so they just missed that wave.
Because they're late 20s?
Kyle's 34, Chris is 29.
Okay.
Yeah, so they kind of missed that. And, they both said, they're happy that they did.
Yeah.
Because they don't know how they would have made it through like the awkward high school years.
Yeah, my girls are 23 and 24, and they were homeschooled, which made it even a little bit different because the interaction and how that went. But yeah, they were kind of neck deep in the middle of all of that stuff. And it affected both of them for sure. Yeah,
well, it presents just different challenges to kind of, find out who you are and, how comfortable you are just being you.
Yeah.
And that was something that, for me growing up, I never needed to question that. Or who my friends were, it's
right.
Like, man, you know who they are.
Yep. And even like you get together and maybe, you're playing your made up rule sporting events and two guys beat the crap out of each other, and then they wipe themselves off and they're best friends again. So
that's right. You learn to get on with it.
Yeah. And I always say that I think, we have all the haters and the different people that say terrible things on the internet. I always contend that those people, if there was a real risk of them being punched in the face by what they say online, I think that they would be less likely to say it.
I'd say that's an absolute truism.
Because back in the day, this is our old guy speak, but back in the day, it's like, dude, if you said something stupid to somebody or something mean or hateful or whatever, it may result in some sort of altercation. And I guess
meet me at the flagpole at noon.
Oh yeah, that's right. Well, I love that you said wait, like kind of the contentment thing. It's funny because I have these little, I don't know if you can, it's probably backwards.
Oh yeah.
I'll turn it. So
no, it was right the other way.
Oh, it was? Okay. Wait,
yeah.
I see it backwards. Wait in contentment. So I have this little like light up kind of goofy AliExpress thing that I bought, but I had written that down because that's I have a hard time with that because I'm always, being like you, entrepreneurial, you kind of push through and always want to go to the next best thing and
you do.
that.
But I mean, those are, I've learned to kind of compartmentalize my life a little bit, better as I've gotten older, and just learn things. My toolbox is pretty full at this stage of the game. It wasn't so full early on, right? You're just developing things and you're figuring out ways to, handle, work-related stress, career-related stress, relationship issues. You're just learning how to deal with all that stuff. So now super content on the personal life side of things. That does not mean that I'm, not keeping my eye on the ball from a business perspective or my foot on the throttle.
Yeah.
So you can't confuse the two.
Right. Well, and, contentment again is not I think it's just it's a way of thinking more than a way of doing, because you can still be driven and pushing through and all that, but the contentment aspect of it, I think very few people, especially men, have that contentment, whether it's, like you said, it's that anxiety about, being a good provider and a good dad and, a good husband or boyfriend or whatever it happens to be, member of society.
Yeah. Well, but I think part of, at least for me, it comes from my wife, and our strong relationship. We've been together 40 years now. It's amazing. Married 37, will be 38 this year. And we just always, I can't say we agreed on everything, but we were respectful enough of each other's opinions that we'd acquiesce when necessary, when we think that they've got a better idea or a better handle on something. So it wasn't so much that, you just dig in and, somebody's got more stripes than the other. And that's just not it. There's no stripes in our family. We're both equals. We have a tremendous amount of respect for each other. And I think that really underpins, the success that we've had as a couple. We haven't argued, like 5 times in our lifetime together. Because that's just not the nature of our relationship. Life's a team sport and we're on the same team. Yeah. We're trying to figure out the best way to win, and operate. And thank God for Vicky, because she keeps me reined in on some crazy, wild ass things that I might want to do if I was, with someone who didn't step up and get in my face.
Yeah, my wife does the same thing for me. She's definitely the grounded one. Now, did Vicky, so tell me about your career path. Have you always been an entrepreneur? Because this kind of feeds into the question. My wife, Michelle, she grew up with a dad that literally he was a fireman, never wanted to move up. He just wanted to be a fireman, which is fine. So he did his 20 years in LA and retired. So her being married, I started my first company, 1998. So for me, we had literally been married like 3 years, and I had worked for a company and then went off and started my own thing. And so that's probably been the biggest stressor for her, is the fact that I'm an entrepreneur, and, some months we do really well and some months we're, way underwater. Yeah. And, is that something that you guys have had to deal with from a career standpoint?
Different for me. Because, so I graduated with a degree in pre-med, biology, pre-medicine. So I was waiting to get into medical schools, had all my applications out and all that kind of stuff. And while I was, after school and waiting to get accepted into med school, I took a job at a local golf shop because, I was a golf nut. I met Vicky and figured I'm going to need to learn how to play golf if I'm going to hang with this woman. She's been kicking my ass ever since.
Oh, nice.
So, I was in there, Strictly Golf in Naperville, Illinois. And, I just happened to bump into a guy who was the district manager at the time. Or no, he was the national account manager for DuPont Pharmaceuticals. And he had a couple of clients in there, so he was kind of whining and dining them. And, we just struck up a conversation. And he was a Southern guy, and he said, "Michael, you ever think about selling drugs? You know, and well, no, you know, I'm kind of waiting to get into med school. Well, he ended up giving me a card and, you know, told me to reach out to him that, you know, he's, you know, taking a new job out in Los Angeles as a district manager, and he'd like to have me on his team as a sales rep. And I didn't know shit from Shinola. Right? You know, I kind of had my career path set. But I ended up reaching out to him. I didn't get accepted into med school the first run through, which is pretty typical back in that day. That was, you know, everybody had good grades, and, you know, you basically looked the same, right? Everybody was salmon swimming upstream, and you hope, you know, the bear didn't get you, and you made it, right? So that was kind of it. It was very difficult back then, mid '80s. So I called him up and I said, hey, you know, I'd like to kind of see what this is all about, and ended up getting the job. I took it, you know, so I think I was an entrepreneur like very early on, but I found myself in corporate America.
Yep.
Which can be a super uncomfortable thing for a lot of people that want to kind of flex their own, you know, muscles. But I didn't let kind of my role stop that for me. And that propelled my career. So a lot of people, they get into corporate America and they just want to be sheep and just kind of go along with the flow. That was never my thing, and I attribute that back to my upbringing and my dad. I just friggin' saw things differently, and I was willing to, you know, change whatever role I happened to be put in. And that's where, you know, I came up with the idea for what ultimately turned into Kuma Care and totally changed an area of medicine, which is crazy to think about. That, you know, a dude just had an idea and had a brother who happened to be a programmer that he talked into, you know, helping him build this system. And the two of them come up with this thing that's changing an area of medicine. It's crazy to think about of what we accomplished.
And I'm interested because I don't know this part of your story. I read your bio, you know, you sent me a little bio and all that. So tell just briefly what that is.
So, you know, so I started in Los Angeles as what they call a hospital rep. So I was the guy that was, you know, scrubbed up and in the OR and teaching doctors how to kind of use drugs like during surgical procedures and whatnot.
Oh, okay.
So that was kind of my role. But one of the main drugs that we had is an anticoagulant called Coumadin, and
which they still use, right? They still use that.
Yeah, it's still around today. But hell, that drug was 40 years old, I think, when I started.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it had been around a long, long time. But right then, I started in '88. So in '89, I think it was, where there was a new indication for the drug for anticoagulation, and it had to do with atrial fibrillation, which you hear all the commercials nowadays. Right? Everybody's talking about AFib. And the need to anticoagulate those patients to help prevent stroke. So that was kind of the thing, right? So I did some good things in LA, and I got promoted to take over all of Northern California, Kaiser, the medical system, up in all Northern Cal. And that was when I got introduced to like the business of healthcare. And so here I am, I'm this, you know, this kid, did some good things, but I befriended a neurologist at Stanford Medical Center. And he's the guy who saw the patients after they had the stroke. Right. So he and I created a real kinship. And I said, look, Greg, I need you to like convince these doctors I got to anticoagulate these people so they don't show up at your office, you know, having a stroke. Right. So help me, you know, get the word out around this. So, I mean, I'm sure I put a wing on this guy's house because, I mean, I had him talking to everybody in Northern California. So what happens? The sales start going crazy, which I'm like, ooh, you know,
yeah, right.
Everybody's using Coumadin. And then I saw the flip side of that coin. There was lots of people showing up in the ER with adverse events because it was so difficult to manage. So I looked at that and you know, looking at how Kaiser operated, you know, they were very systemic about how they managed certain areas of medicine. So I thought, well, why are we like managing these patients like in a friggin' 3-ring binder? Why isn't there something that cocoons the risk of this therapy better? So I took it upon myself to build a computer software system that would do that. Now you got to, put yourself in the mindset. This is before the internet existed.
Yeah.
Right? So this is going back, right? So long story short, my brother was getting his MIS degree at the University of Arizona in programming. So I called him up and said, "Hey, I got this idea. Would you help me build this thing?" So I ended up, befriending a lot of cardiologists throughout the Kaiser network. And I just did good market research. Like, how are you guys doing it today? What would you like to see if it was like the ideal world for you? What would that look like? So I just gathered market-driven insight and then just, put the thoughts in order and figured out how to build a good system to do it. I didn't call it anything fancy at the time. It was just the Coumadin patient tracking system. Once DuPont saw what it was all about and it really hit the mark, they branded it as CumaCare, which was awesome. That was a great brand name. And then it went everywhere. It went worldwide, and it changed that drug incredibly. The drug went from 200 million to 600 million in 1 year.
Wow.
Because we figured out how to cocoon the risk. And again, that drug was 40 years old when I started. It's like, why did somebody else think of this? I don't know.
Yeah.
But I did. And I had the guts to kind of see it through. So, and that was, again, I'm in corporate America where everybody just thinks you get in line and you're just a cog in the wheel. You don't need to be. That's fine. Yeah. That's what you want to do. If you want to be like a pro in place, you can do that.
Yeah.
But if you want to frickin' make a mark, you can.
Yeah.
I kind of proved it.
Well, and that's one thing I love that because I think a lot of the guys that would be listening to this, because, I don't know what the percentage of entrepreneurs are versus, people that have real jobs, quote unquote, real jobs. But I think a lot of people probably, and men, especially if they need to be a provider and have a good paycheck and all of that kind of stuff, which is great. I mean, I love the idea of having that, that more relative, security that I haven't had for 20 something years. But that doesn't necessarily mean that, and like you said, if this is kind of what you want to do, but the whole goal for me on all this maxed out man stuff is just to help guys realize that just because you're at a certain place now doesn't necessarily mean you have to stay in that place. And there are other avenues to get you where, to take you a little bit further, to work with what you've got, but to improve yourself. And I think that ideal of being an entrepreneur within your work environment, if that's something, it doesn't even necessarily have to be called entrepreneurship, but it can be called being the most that you can be within whatever context you're working in.
Well, I looked at it like I never limited my impact to the role I was assigned. I mean, I was a drug rep. I was at the bottom of the barrel within a pharmaceutical company, right? And, I did something that, in hindsight, if I look back at it, like if I would have gone on and got into medical school and pursued that route and become a physician, I would have never had this big of an impact ever, as a sole practitioner. I mean, because I got awarded a few nice things at DuPont. Because I moved the needle, and they estimated that, just through my efforts and driving this and, cocooning the risk around this therapy, that millions of people have not had a stroke because of that.
That's
and they'll
awesome.
Never know me. They'll never know me from Adam. They have no clue. Right? And that's okay. But I would have never had that kind of impact as a sole practitioner. So it's just funny how things kind of come full circle and how your life can seemingly take an odd turn, but all of a sudden there's a mirror and there you are again.
That's right. Yeah.
You are who you're going to be. Right. So I was going into it to try and, help people live better lives. And, I did it through a different mechanism.
Mm-hmm. And not everybody can say that they've, saved millions of lives, but, it doesn't mean I mean, we do a lot with the trades, right? Michelle's a welder and hobbyist welder. And so we've been in that group. And if you're, let's say you're a welder, right? The systems that are in place in your shop may not be the most ideal. So look for ways to improve that and improve everything. And, I think that's changing the system that was in place for Coumadin in the medical community is something you saw, and it's missing systems. Systems are like, I'm huge on systems. I think you can have a system for everything. I've been doing this thing called Maxed Out Morning, which will be, part of what we offer with this stuff, but it's a systemic approach to your mornings. And it's like, do this, do that, do this, this is how you can work through that. And it makes a huge difference.
DJ Patterson does that same thing. He's really big on the routine, the morning routine, and just bake it in. And I got to tell you, I'm terrible at it. I fall off that wagon so easily. I mean, I get on it for a little while and I'm solid and I'm feeling good, and then I just fall off it. I have to get better at that, especially as I get older. Because man, I'm telling you, age. It's not for the faint of heart.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, all of us face different things. And I think you seem pretty healthy, like a pretty healthy guy if you're doing your hiking and stuff every day. The thing that's interesting about that statement that you made is I really need to get better at it. The question I would ask is why? I mean, if what you're doing is working for you, that doesn't necessarily, whatever systems I offer to people, hey, these are 8 steps that I do. Maybe you do 2 steps of these 8, or 1 or whatever,
Because I think what worked for me at 50 isn't going to work for me at 70.
Yeah.
So I have to be willing to adapt to my changing environment, whether I like it or not. But it's like, I'm losing muscle mass. I'm having a complete redistribution of like my body mass.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, I've noticed that. And, my doctor's a friend of mine, and she's like, man, you got to start, lifting weights. Otherwise, you're just going to start consuming all your muscle.
Did you have testosterone tested yet?
Have I what?
Have you had your testosterone tested?
Just through the normal stuff. It was okay. Yeah. I mean, it gets, it goes down as you get older, but.
Yeah, well, what's interesting about that, I've been on, and I'll talk about, we'll actually do a podcast. I have a whole section on TRT, which is testosterone replacement therapy. Something to think about is this is an interesting aspect about the medical community, right? So they have this testosterone, and there's several other norms that they give, but testosterone is one that they say over the last 70 years, since like the 50s, it's consistently dropped over every population. For men, primarily because we're not out in the fields and we have less muscle mass and all that. And so rather than say, hey, maybe we have a systemic medical problem going on with men across all age groups, they said, let's just drop the standard. And so the norms necessarily may not be what's best for you. So something to talk to your doctor about. I'm big, like it literally changed my life. If I didn't have, I was right at or below the norm for a 40, I think I was like 47 whenever I started it, but I felt like crap. Like I was like sitting in the back of my closet, crying like a little infant because I just like, I was just hated my life and, low energy, body fat, cortisol, all of those things. And once I started doing it, and I'm on a fairly low dose, but like I'm like the evangelist for TRT. At this point.
I've thought about it. I have thought about it actually.
Yeah. Cause like the norm for someone your age is probably around 300 or less. And most men operate best at like 800 to 1200. And that's, and I'm not a physician. I'm not giving medical advice. Let me give the podcast disclaimer, blah, 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 blah. But, it's interesting. We're lucky as men because it's fairly easy to fix hormonal stuff. Like my wife is super pissed off about hormonal stuff now because she's my age and not quite to the menopausal thing, but like she's like, you suck, because literally you can just take a shot twice a week and you fix it. Like they can't do that with the female body.
Females are complex.
Yeah, on every possible level. But I mean, that's the nice thing for dudes is like literally, if you get that level up, you may find that a lot of that really
I suspect
changes.
that's true.
So, yeah, so that's my spiel on that. So, so you've been married, what'd you say, almost 38 years?
Yeah.
And that's super awesome. Now, are you? Does Vicky participate in the business now, or what does she do? Is she?
No, just, she's, well, we call her the HR department. So if there's any conflicts amongst the team, meaning me and the kids, Vicky's our HR department. But no, she's just super supportive. And I mean, she loves her job. She's been doing this a long time because it's really a second career for her. She is a paralegal by profession, but then, elected to be a stay-at-home mom. So she raised Kyle. We had Kyle when we lived in Los Angeles. And then, when we finished up in San Francisco, and I took another promotion back to Illinois, where ironically enough, I took the guy who hired me when I saw him at Strictly Golf. I ended up getting that role.
Oh, really? That's awesome.
I mean, it's so crazy how this stuff works out. So yeah, I was the national account manager. So I had a third of the United States. And that's where I really learned the business of healthcare.
Yeah.
And I came in as more of a clinically oriented guy. So there was kind of two tracks that they offered me after the whole, CumaCare thing. They offered me, I could go down what they call the clinical liaison route, which is super clinically focused, or I could go into the national account route, which was business focused. And I'm like, well, I don't know anything about the business thing. I mean, I was the guy that, going through graduation, scoffing at the people with the business and marketing degrees, right? Telling them to get a real education. So I'm like, I don't know anything about that. So I think I'm going to do that. Nice. It made me super uncomfortable. But I've come to learn that, the things that make you uncomfortable are probably the things worth doing. That's just kind of your body telling you to get ready.
Right.
You're going to learn something, and it's going to be uncomfortable, but you're going to be okay.
That's awesome. So you work with your kids, like you work with your children. One of the things, being a dad is hard. Yeah. So, I mean, obviously you didn't, and was that something that even had occurred to you, or is it just kind of fell together as your kids? Cause they neither had a career. Did either of them have a career before?
They had a career going, at that point. And I was wore out. So I guess going back to, the earlier topic about being an entrepreneur. Here I was in corporate America, and, I did my thing. I moved the needle. But then I was presented with an opportunity to really leave that safety net. So I just got done launching Symbicort for AstraZeneca at that point in time. So that's $1 billion drug. You see it still on TV. So I just launched that. We set all kinds of records within the pharmaceutical industry. And a buddy of mine approached me about, joining him. He got recruited out of Cardinal Health to be the CEO of this failing, home infusion company in Philadelphia. And he said, I think you could help me save this place. He said, you think about leaving AstraZeneca? I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? I just launched $1 billion drug. I'm doing okay over here.
Yeah.
But he's like, I think, you've always been focused on getting close to the patients. This gives you an opportunity to do that. So, he knew how to talk me into it. He knew kind of what made me, get excited. And it was very true. The more you move up within, like large organizations like DuPont Pharmaceuticals or AstraZeneca, the farther away you get from the people you're ultimately trying to help. Right. The patient. And I was feeling that. Yes, the money was great and all that kind of stuff. But you do lose some connectivity. So that really spoke to me. I talked to Vicky because I was tied up. I had the golden handcuffs on me. I got options and all that kind of stuff just pouring on me. You're right. They're trying to keep you. Yeah. And they invested in me. So I appreciated that. I didn't take this lightly at all. But ultimately, you know, Vicky said, look, you're going to make a success out of whatever you do. So, you know, I trust you that you're going to join that company and you are going to figure it out. She was just so stinking supportive, you know, because I was risking everything. I was risking our retirement.
Yeah.
Really. Unnecessarily, because I was really fulfilled and happy. But I did it anyway. So I left. I gave up, you know, significant sums of money to go into this thing that was an absolute disaster. I mean, seriously, I mean, it was a disaster. We were foregoing our own compensation just to be able to make the bank covenants every month.
Oh, wow.
That's how tight this was, right? When we went into that business, it was a great little business, by the way, too. It was, what was it? God, it was probably 20 some odd years old at that point, maybe 18. And private equity had bought out the founder. You know, he was an older gentleman at that point in time, like in his early 70s. So Jerry took the big payday and he was gone. And they put two guys in charge of the company that killed it in 18 months.
Oh, wow.
Here's a 20-year-old company that they put two guys in charge of it that killed it in 18 months. Like, that just shows you what poor leadership could do, right?
Yeah.
You know, they made some really bad decisions and handled things terribly. And then they just started firing people, laying people off to try and make the bank covenants. So it was a worthless investment in 18 months. And it cost them a lot of money. They paid $55 million for the business.
Wow.
It was worthless in 18 months. So they brought us in there to try and resurrect this thing, right? And we did. That's where, you know, I kind of put my entrepreneurial hat on again. And, you know, I've got a different kind of process when I tackle stuff like this. You know, I kind of go underground a little bit for maybe the first 2 months and just learned everything I could about those particular areas of medicine that business was focusing on. And there was this tiny little group of patients that nobody wanted, super complex. None of the competitors were trying to tackle it. And I thought, well, shit, let me sink my teeth into this. Nobody seems to want to figure this out.
Right.
So that is what I did. I friggin' put in the work. I figured it out. So that meant creating systems that frankly didn't exist. It meant creating an electronic medical record that didn't exist. Building training institutions that never existed. You know, it meant creating a lot of things that didn't exist. But, you know, at the end of the day, I created the largest, you know, provider of intrathecal drug therapy in America through the process. Wow. Okay. So, you know, it can be done if you know, you get the right people around a table and everybody is committed to the vision. And, you know, as the leader of that whole thing, you got to enroll people. Right. Yeah. I mean, they got to feel like, all right, I am getting on the Abens bandwagon here and we're going to friggin' make this thing happen. So we did, but I was wore out after running that for 10 years. So yeah, I retired and both kids had their own careers going. They were doing great. I was happy to be done. I was wore out.
And was that like, do you find the creation process of it? Is that the fun part? And then it gets tiring in the running of it?
Honestly,
or is that,
I really liked all aspects of it. You know, like, the formation of it is of course anxiety riddled, right? Because you're making so many decisions that you don't have a roadmap. You're literally carving the path. So you hope you make the right decisions and you put an operating model in place that, you know, you think is great. And then you find out, you know, once you add another 200 patients into the mix, the thing blows up. Right? So it's like, oh my God, I got to refigure this. Right. So I must have changed the operating model of that place 15 times.
Wow.
You know, because the scale kept creating new challenges. You know, and my job as the leader of that whole organization was to kind of stay ahead of that.
Right.
Because you can't stress the system so much that, you know, people start leaving because they're just wrung out. So I was super careful about like loads on my employees.
Yeah.
So very, very careful to not like overload them and always try and, you know, spend the money, you know, spend the freaking money to make sure that you preserve a good work environment for your people. So that was one of the things that I really focused on hard. And, you know, the nurses in particular, because I think we had about 150 nurses at that point, you know, that we had run through our own accredited training institution because there wasn't one that existed. So we had to create.
Oh, wow.
You know, so, you know, they always called it the best job ever, you know, because I was mindful of their kind of spirit, because they were the linchpin between, you know, what we were trying to do as an organization and helping these patients get their lives back in order. And, you know, intrathecal drug therapy is not kidding around. You know, so you don't, you know, go buy these drugs at a pharmacy. You need to make these drugs in a clean room environment. Super concentrated drugs delivered continuously into the patient's spine.
Wow.
It is not kidding around. You know, through fully implanted drug delivery systems. There's no external ports or anything. You know, this is a really high-tech medicine, and that's why nobody wanted to figure it out, which is why I did.
Yeah. Now, like, do you find how do you see the health? I'm just genuinely curious because we talk about, so my youngest is a paramedic in Atlanta, and she's just starting to go into the pre-med world, right? She's thinking about that path, and I'm like, hey, have you talked to any doctors that do this for a living now about what the state of our healthcare looks like? And I'm interested in being that because how long have you been out of it? 10 years?
I retired in October of 17. So
okay.
No, not that.
So only five or 6 years.
Yeah.
So you were you kind of saw the changes. Let's not say degradation, but it probably is degradation of the healthcare industry.
Yeah. It's tough to be a doc.
Yeah.
Really tough. You know, and it really depends on what area of medicine you're wanting to go into. It's still super rewarding. Yeah. I have a lot of friends who are physicians. Some, you know, they handle it better than others. Some have acquiesced and just become part of like a larger healthcare system. So they don't, you know, do their own thing anymore because the burden of carrying that is really difficult. Yeah. You know, insurance companies and whatnot, it's super, super complicated and all the regulations. Other doctors that are a bit more specialized and procedural oriented, they seem to really be doing well because they love the technician aspect of it. You know, if they're doing knee replacements or shoulder surgeries, that kind of thing, right? So there's a real, you know, kind of fulfilling thing. It's very immediate gratification to do a good procedure. Like if you're, you know, an open heart guy or gal, you know, you do a triple bypass on somebody who's on death's door, and now you just gave them, you know, another 20 years of life. Yeah, you're going to feel pretty good about that. So there's a lot of fulfillment that still comes from being a physician. It all depends on what areas you want to go into and kind of what excites you. Yeah, here it seems like we've got two major healthcare providers. We have terrible healthcare in Bozeman, Montana, where I live. You know, it takes 9 months to get in to see anybody. It takes forever. You know, it's very expensive. And we have basically we have two healthcare systems that's buying everybody up. So all the independents, we're getting more now what they call boutique medical care, which is if you can afford it, they don't even bill insurance. You just go pay for it. So I was just curious you got all those billionaires up there in Montana. Oh yeah. I mean, dude, they don't go to the hospital here unless there's something. You gotta know your market. If I was a doctor, I'd be doing the same damn thing. Yeah. This is where like Justin Timberlake and all these guys have houses up here in Big Sky, and Bill Gates had a house. I'm not sure if he still has a house up there. I mean, they use them, you know, 4 days a year, but I'm interested. In bringing it back to kind of life in general, I'm interested to know from like a dad standpoint, right? Like that. I was joking with my girls yesterday saying, I'm, you know, talking to Michael and both of his kids help him run his company or run his company for him, or, you know, it's a team effort, obviously. But I'm like, what did you guys are losers. Why didn't you go into the family business? And they're like, yeah, he really set the bar high there. But I'm interested to know, like,
as you raised your kids, is there any kind of path that you took that you would advise other people to take, other guys to take? Because I think being a dad is one of the hardest things that we do.
Yeah, I think it's about trying to like hold your judgment. Let your kids kind of find their own path. I mean, it's good to be there and provide some bookends, safety bookends. But I think too many people impose themselves a little too heavy on their kids. Mm-hmm. Kyle has always been an idea kid. I mean, Vicky was so great. She bought this thing that she put right above his bedroom door. Trust your crazy ideas.
Oh, that's awesome.
That kid grew up with that as like his moniker, right? And he's always looked at things a little differently, from a unique perspective. And here we are, fast forward, now he's an adult, and building, beautiful software systems because he just sees things differently. Mm-hmm. I'm pretty sure he sees the Matrix at this point. So he's a super brilliant, kid in and of his own right. Can't call him a kid anymore. He's 34.
Well, they're always our kids, right?
He's, a super brilliant guy. But he's got just a real kind of art and creative side that he overlays onto the technical expertise, which I think, creates a unique outcome. It just does. And we see it through the whole evolution of Urable. Because Chris and I are the ones that are really pulling in the market-driven insight, no different than I did back with the cardiologist back in the day. You pull in the market-driven insight and then you go to work. You think about your way to solve those challenges, whatever those are. And then, then Kyle's the one that ultimately has to code it and create the user experience behind it. And he's just unbelievable. Really. I mean, he's world class. Or we couldn't have done Urable without somebody with that level of skill set. Really, like if I was farming this out to someplace in India or Vietnam or South Korea, which is kind of a typical development route.
Right. Yep.
We could have never come out with something this elegant.
And Urable is you call it a business management system, right? So it's another
so
system.
Much more than a CRM. I mean, people lump it into generally into a CRM, but it's got a CRM component, but CRMs aren't designed to do what.
And it's specific to just to give me a 2-sentence or paragraph or whatever of Urable.
I'm a car enthusiast. That's the only reason we developed this thing for car detailers. But Urable is a business management platform that helps businesses operate. It handles both internal operations as well as customer, relationships.
So it helps them do the estimates and customer management side of things. It does pretty much everything. It's really
automated workflows, you name it, and it's kind of got it in there.
That's great.
It's in my world when I was running Pentech Health, we had an ERP system in place. That's an enterprise resource planning tool. So super complex. These are multi-million-dollar investments, and it costs you multi-millions just to run them per year. So it's not kidding around, but it is what runs your company.
Yeah.
It ensures that you're putting out a consistently good product. So we tried to build Urable to be like a light ERP system for the detailing industry. Because, I mean, you can't come in heavy-handed into an industry that's, mostly, people writing stuff down on, paper calendars.
Yeah.
And, the sticky note system, it's like you can't be dropping a full blown ERP on a market like that.
Yeah.
Nobody would warm up to it. It's just too much of a step change. So I'm very careful about how I introduce systems. And I just learned that really over the 30 years of my professional career, creating things that just didn't exist. You needed to kind of hit the market a little bit ahead of where it's at, but not too far. Otherwise, you're going to leave the vast majority of people behind. So you kind of have to hit the market a little ahead of where it's at and then be careful on the pace of evolution so you can bring people along with you.
Yeah, because you're changing the detailing industry, because by and large, detailing, relatively low barrier of entry, relatively low business education. You know, like I did a bunch of business education when I first started Detailer's Helper, because no one was doing it, and no one knows. You know, a very small percentage of the detailing industry are what I call business owners that happen to run a detailing business.
Yeah.
And so you've used Urable, which, I mean, you're bringing up the whole industry with
that's our goal.
This platform, which is really amazing.
Yeah, we're trying, because, I mean, you know, so many people get into this from the technician side of thinking. And that's, you know, if you're going to run a business, you know, it's important that you've got some energy around whatever it is you're going to offer, right?
Right.
Whether you're cutting grass or, you know, doing landscape, whatever it is, you got to have some energy around it. You got to like what you're doing. But that's not enough to run a business. That's one, you know, facet, you know, on the diamond. You know, you have to have lots of, you know, polished edges to be able to run a company.
Right.
Just being technically proficient in whatever your craft is just not enough to make it most of the time. There will always be exceptions.
Right.
But most of the time, you really need to have a more well-rounded approach. Otherwise, you just work yourself to death, too.
Yeah.
You know, if you're always the technician, the only way to make more money is to do more. You know,
Right.
you're never taking a step back to look at doing it differently.
Yeah.
Right.
That's the whole E-Myth Revisited ideal, right? Which is technician versus real entrepreneurial. And,
yeah,
you know,
but I mean, technicians can be the entrepreneur, but you need to give yourself kind of the space to think like that, you know, and get out of your business. You know, too many people just get lost in it, and then they don't, you know, and then planning. Yeah, I'm coming from big corporate America. I'm in Fortune 50 companies, for crying out loud. Everything was planned.
Yeah.
You know, we had a huge planning cycle that we would take, you know, each department through to make sure we had our ducks in a row, you know, for the next year. You know, we knew what the budget was going to be. We knew where the big investment dollars were going to be. We had a good idea on what the revenue was going to be coming in. So, you know, you can kind of sleep easy at night like that when you have a plan that you're executing against.
Yeah, because if you don't have a plan in detailing, you lose one coating job that costs you $500 in profit. You don't have a plan in a major business like that, you lose $25 million.
Yeah, it's not so easy to do. Right?
Yeah. And you have, you know, 15,000 employees that are all building towards the same plan versus you and maybe your helper.
Yeah. But I think, you know, you can right size the planning for any business.
Yeah.
I don't care if you're just a young high school kid, you know, doing something, you can still, you know, have a right sized plan. The point is to have a plan.
Yeah.
And then execute against it. So many people in this industry, they just wade in. They just kind of wade in, you know, and it's like, you know, you can be better. You can do better. And Urable is just one of those tools that we hope, you know, can help the industry, you know, just do better, put forth a more professional image, charge professional rates.
Yeah.
That was always my thing. That's the only reason Urable exists, is because I'm a car enthusiast. So I was taking my car to these high-end shops. And as a business executive, I was, you know, I was dismayed at the customer experience. It's like, God, I love what you guys do, but you run shitty businesses. You guys don't know what you're doing. You know, I spend $3,500 with you, and then I never hear from you again.
Yeah.
You reach out to me. Maybe I got another car. Maybe you got something new to offer. But no, it's all about new customer acquisition.
Yeah.
So, you know, when the kids came up with the idea to really, you know, start a boutique, you know, development firm, and it was their idea, and that may be why it's different with your kids. This was their idea. This was not my idea, right? This was their idea to start a development firm. I'm the one that picked the market. I picked detailing because, you know, as a car enthusiast.
Yeah, because you had already seen the missing pieces.
Yeah, because the services are awesome. You know, the paint correction, the ceramic coatings, friggin' awesome, right? But everything else wrapped around it was not so great. You know, don't tell me you can't take a credit card. Are you freaking kidding me? You know,
or don't tell me if you're going to take it, you upcharge me by 7% to quote unquote cover the fees, right? That's
you know, so I just looked at it, through a completely different lens as the consumer and kind of the target audience. So that's why I picked detailing to really develop this solution for.
Yeah, I've been trying to beat I beat everybody in business about this ideal customer. Like, who is your ideal customer? Even, go through and define who that is, give them a name, give them hobbies, give them family, all of that stuff. And you were able to help because you were the ideal customer. You were already your ideal customer.
Yeah, I think I was the target for most of these businesses. I was somebody who's really into their cars. I tend to be a long-term owner. I squeeze everything out of my cars. I race them. These are not, garage queens. I drive the snot out of my cars.
Yeah.
So, and I've got resources I'm willing to spend.
Yeah.
But nobody ever.
No one will take my money, right? Like that's
like I'm like this. I'm like, why are they right?
You got two stacks of $100 bills, and you're just looking to hand it to somebody, right? That's
yeah.
Now, do you do given your systems, do you do systems in your life in the same way? Because I have a really hard time not trying to systemize my life. My family, as they said, we're pretty sure you're not actually a human. We think you're a robot. Like, do you do that in your own, being that you're a big systems guy? Is that something you kind of take
I don't
your
think
personal
I
life?
do, unless I do it completely subconsciously. I'm not even aware of it. I don't think I do, honestly.
That's interesting. So you just use all that system information, and then in your own life, you're just flying by the seat of your pants.
Things are good. Things are good. I suppose we did have, some kind of I wouldn't call them systems. They were just more like ground rules on how we ran the house.
Yeah.
Like Vicki and I were very big on like a no moods household. So like if I had a really rough, stressful day, I really tried to leave that in the garage when I got home, because I wanted to be a present dad. Because one of the things, I suppose this is a bit of a systemized thing. We have family dinner.
Mm-hmm.
That was the ritual for us. We have family dinner. We sit down. That's our chance to kind of connect, when the kids were going through school and whatnot. That was our chance to connect and just kind of just talk about stuff. I tried not to burden them with whatever I was dealing with because, nobody needed to hear that stuff. When the kids would go to bed, then I could re-engage with the challenges that I was struggling with.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, we really tried to isolate the kids from any kind of work related stress or like any financial stress that we were feeling as a couple.
That's cool.
We really, really tried to make sure they didn't feel that.
I think that family dinner thing is very important, and it may not be family dinner. It may be, depending on people's schedules and all that, but I think that and phone free, obviously now, which wasn't an issue when your kids were growing up probably, but, having that dedicated time to come together as a family.
Yeah, so I mean, maybe that's a systematic approach to it, but yeah, I really believe in that. That was always a kind of a sacred time for us, and a kind of a quiet time, right? You can kind of reflect on the day, think about what's important to you, and all that kind of stuff. It's the old fashioned stuff that tends to have long lasting legs, and I think the kids now that they're both adults, they really appreciate the family dinner time.
Yeah.
So, and they're doing that now in their own families, which is nice.
That's great.
It's just a good chance to connect and stay close.
I think we always use that old fashioned phrase as a derogatory term. And I think that not everything from the past was bad.
No, certainly not.
Now that we're rewriting history in different ways, and there's but I think that some of that old fashioned ideology is still something that really would make a difference.
Some of it's just it's the old adage of everything you need to know in life you learn in kindergarten, kind of on the playground. You learn how to interact with people, and you learn how to problem solve.
Yeah.
But yeah, we were careful about maintaining the moods because I had a pretty stressful, professional life. It was very successful. Don't get me wrong, but I was carrying a load, man. It was tough. I was trying to do some big stuff.
Yeah. I think men carry a lot more than what most of us let people know about. And, and so it's, we internalize that stuff a lot.
Well, that's where it's so key to have a spouse and great
Yeah.
open communication. I mean, Vicky knew all of my struggles.
Yeah.
And she was just, giving me such amazing advice, or maybe, just a shoulder to kind of lean on and cry on, if I was really struggling with something.
Yeah.
Just having somebody that you could just share your struggles and burdens with is huge just in and of itself.
Yeah. Now, do you take this? I've had you for a while now, but I'm interested to know, as someone, because we're rare, right? Like, I've been married 28 years. You've been married almost 38 years, and that's rare now, which is weird that it is, and sad that it is. But is there anything in particular as a husband that you've done that you didn't do when you were younger and you do now, or things that you would give advice to younger guys? I mean, and younger may be, Kyle's age too, because that's, they're still trying to figure it out and all that. I'm interested to know, like, people always ask me, what's the success? How do you have a marriage that's happy? Like, we're happier every year. How do you have a happy marriage at 28 years or 38 years or whatever?
I don't think this has changed for me from day one, quite honestly. And I think it's a mindset. I have always tried to just be worthy of Vicky deciding to spend her life with me.
That's amazing. I love that.
So I've just tried to be worthy of her making that decision. I don't think people look at it from that point of view enough. I think if they did, they'd maybe check themselves a lot more than they do. And I approach this like I do everything else in life. It's a team sport. Mm-hmm. Who wants to go through life, on their own? That's no fun. It's a team sport, So pick your teammates well, but, honor the fact that they picked you too, and be respectful of that.
And what does it mean to you to be worthy? I'm just curious how you would define that.
I want to be somebody who's not so ingrained in their own ways that I am not going to flex when I, need to for my partner. Yeah. You got to be willing to, improve like who you are. I'm a very different man today than I was when we got married, and thankfully, that's largely attributable to Vicky. A lot of it is just kind of seeing how she is. And, just good general observations, that you can make and how she interacts with people, and just think, God, I probably wouldn't have handled that the same way. That was really good. Yeah. You got to be able to self-reflect, and be willing to internalize that and then incorporate it. I've always focused on being worthy of her, making that decision to invest her life, in me.
That's
awesome.
That's
what she was doing, and it's what I was doing. I was investing mine in her. Yeah. And I mean, this is the only go around we have. Why wouldn't you do that with the person that you choose to be with? Yeah. And I never for an instant thought that this was something that could fail.
And it's having a personal elasticity, right? Like
that's a good way to put it.
You're changing yourself as needed. And I'm sure that she's changed over the years as well.
I'm sure I've had an impact on her as well. Yeah.
So that's the goal.
But I mean, it's a little like watching an hour hand on a clock. You don't see it moving, but you know it is,
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Cause it's interesting. Cause we got married probably, it sounds like about the same point in life. I think we were 22, 23, somewhere in there. And so, we grew up together. So we didn't know squat when we got married about life or whatever. So I think so many people now wait to get married until later, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I think that there's a certain nicety about growing up together, and growing up, then growing old, right? That's something that's
well, I mean, growing up, you bring up a really interesting point, because you are figuring it out together then, right? Where if you do wait, you have figured out, like if you're 30, you've probably figured out kind of who you are.
Yeah.
At that point, like my mom used to say, you're not an adult till you turn 30. So, so if you wait that long to kind of get into a relationship, you know who you are, and there's real value in that too. But you still need to, have the right perspective going into a long-term relationship, that, you're there for that other person as much as they're there for you.
Yeah.
So you really just have to have that giving kind of attitude and mindset.
I've always referred to Michelle in two ways. Either she's my hot wife, which is actually how I have her in my phone, or I typically refer to her as my bride, because I think the connotation of bride is different than wife. And I think that's similar to your ideal, which is if I always treat her as my bride, which that excitement of when she first walked down the aisle and the newness and that my role as a husband to be the best me that I can be. And so that's awesome. I really like the being worthy part of it. That's really cool.
Yeah. Still trying every day.
Well, I hope so. We'll keep trying until, we're dead. I guess that's the goal, is to get better and better. And I think that probably based on what I've seen so far and what I know of you, it seems like you're in a similar path as us, which is, it really does get better all the time. Like that's like, if last year was better, this year's better than last year. And I expect next year to be better than this year. And that's,
I mean, when we were just taking our 3 mile or 5 mile hike the other day, I just reached down and just, grabbed Vicky's hand while we were walking. And I just said, thanks for my life. Because awesome. I wouldn't be who I am or where I'm at if it wasn't for her.
Yeah.
Because she's had an indelible impact on who I am and who I've become.
That's great.
Eternally grateful for that.
That's amazing. Well, man, I've had you for over an hour. I appreciate you taking the time. I like
these long form podcast kind of things. This is more of a Joe Rogan kind of thing where you can get into it.
Well, and I mean, honestly, like having just be able to sit around and talk about stuff probably that you don't normally talk about on these is fun. Because like I said, I'd love to just, if we were going to go have lunch together, I would be asking you the same questions and getting the same insight. Which is fun. So I really appreciate you taking the time. I'm honored that you're guest number one, because I think this is set the standard for the rest of the podcast.
Well, hopefully it's a good tone.
Oh, it's awesome, man. I'm glad to know you much better than I knew you an hour ago. So that's awesome.
If you're looking to really maximize your life and become the man you were made to be, head over to maxedoutman.com and get your journey started today.